Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of the Lectern series. I'm here again with Ethan Hsieh, but he's going to introduce us to 2 other beautiful people that I've gotten to know quite well and I've had the privilege of working with. We're discussing as an example of how to bring virtuosity to virtue and how to take a philosophical understanding into a philosophical way of life. As an example of that, we're discussing Ethan's TIAMAT process, which is a pedagogical container in 3 tiers that is designed to integrate work from performance practices, work from 4 ecology, work that Ethan and I have done, work that Ethan and I and Taylor and Chris have done, and so forth. And he is, it's very much a living thing. He is constantly working with it. And 2 of the people that he works with are Rens, who is to his left on the screen. Ethan will introduce both these people more readily. Rens is somebody I've gotten to know and meet in person several times, and he has found the one true calling. He has taken up the formal education in cognitive science, which is what every human being should ultimately do. And then to Ethan's right is his beautiful partner, Ellie, who I've gotten to know in several in-person instances. Sarah's also got to interact with her and other people, Jason, my son. And everybody comes away with a very powerful impression of what a good person she is. Both Rens and Ellie have also been doing a lot of work, both independently and with Ethan. So that's why we're all here. And what I'm going to do now is just emphasize again how crucial this is. One of the questions I repeatedly and justifiably, I'm not expressing frustration, I'm expressing appreciation and understanding. One of the questions I frequently get is, okay, John, you've taken us through this beautiful argument, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, or recently, Seeing God Again for the First Time, Part 1. But now what? And this is a way of answering, but now what? How do you cultivate virtuosity and bring it to virtue? And how do you do that as a way of transforming a philosophical understanding into a philosophical way of life? So I'm going to turn things over to Ethan. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. It's actually a huge pleasure to be able to be here with Rens and Ellie. I think both of you have probably had the most intimate contact with TIAMAT, and especially we've just come off the Euro tour where we've done 15 containers in 3 months together, which is a lot. So these are friends and fellow pilgrims, really. So what I'm going to do is do what John does with me, and then I will challenge you all to introduce yourselves, but I'm going to appreciate the fuck out of you all first. First of all, Rens and I met actually here in London with John on the crest of a hill.
Yes.
Where you had sent me an email to the VF contact from 2 weeks prior.
Something like that.
Something like that. The most lovingly I've read to you back like a few weeks ago. And you spelled aspirate. You said aspirate, which is really interesting.
I did misspell.
I don't know if it was a misspelling. We've gone back and forth about this.
I think it was a misspelling.
Yeah, but since then, we met, we spent some time with John, and then you came to a container that I was holding in Prague for a tier 1 and tier 2. And then since then, we've been really good friends. Yeah. You organized a London tier 1 for me, I think pretty much that same year.
Yes.
And I was really, really taken by how quickly the 2 of us can fall into a deep dialogos. You were always up for it. You let me sleep on your couch, which was fantastic. And since then, especially a couple of weeks ago, when we had to devise a new exercise because there was like something that came up that's like, oh no, this needs to shift. We were up till 1.
Something like that.
Bloody hell. Yeah.
In the Czech countryside.
Yes, like on the porch in the rain and going, okay, well, let's try this. And, I want to really appreciate you as somebody who is not just somebody who's training as a facilitator, and therefore I have the privilege of sharing knowledge and experience, or at least what I have, but also somebody who is deeply collaborative and creating work with me like this. And we talked about this in yesterday's conversation, that it's a collaborative effort, and you're a big part of that. So I wanted to appreciate that about you. And then, of course, my love, who is, I think, possibly the only person in the world I know. Sometimes this is, and I say this lovingly, but Ellie has an amazing resilience to be able to sit down with me, and then if I go, hey, wait, what do you think about like the nature of death in relation to the sacred? And you have a long discussion with me that folds in Whitehead.
Yes, for now.
Yeah, because you're going down a rabbit hole with Whitehead now. And I think you're somebody who is like forever and always available at the ready, at the kindling of the dialogues. I can always come to you with something. And you engage with me in good faith and really open up what I find very difficult to sometimes do at the level of complexity that I find enriching and generative in my everyday life. You have radically renormalized the world for me. And that's incredibly powerful. This is besides the fact that when I run up into particularly pedagogical issues with teaching, how I show up, how I am showing up, even in a non-pedagogical context, because you are a teacher, so much so in your bones, I can always come to you and hold that question of like, okay, how do I be most virtuously of service to people that have entrusted me with their development? And I really don't think that I could have done this layer of work, like not just in time, like the Euro tour, but like to increase my capacity to the level that I have, if you were not there to hold that tonos with me and show me what I'm missing. And in the loving, graceful way that you do. So I'll leave it to you to cover up any holes that I might have left in there. But yeah, so thank you both. Thank you both for being here.
What holes are we looking to fill? Like,
Who are you?
who I am. Yeah. Who am I? God, it's a hard question for me. I grew up all over, Dutch, Latvian, split nationalities. I first did a bachelor's in astronomy. Then I did a 3-year conservatory training at a drama school. Then I worked for 3 years as a struggling artist, in which time I met Ethan and you, John. And then now I'm starting my master's degree in cognitive science in October. So, yes. So that's who I am, roughly, a scatterboard of a person. Yeah.
I am. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm Ellie. I come from a dance background mainly that took up most of my life into my late 20s, and then I tried to make a switch into environmental science and humanities. And then just as I was graduating from that course, from that master's, I swiped right
Yeah.
on Bumble on Ethan. And then I think my life has taken another kind of tilt. But somehow in a way that allows me to fold in all the experience that I've had before in different areas. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good to mention for context that both of you are also in our Aspire program, and are necessarily aspirants and really co-facilitators of the work with me. And it's been such a blessing to be able to like step back after 10 years of doing this, to be able to be supported by yourselves, by Adela or Naz, or some of these amazing people that are working with us. So I thought it would be good on the back of the last conversation, as we move into tier 2 and we're really talking about like dynamics, what are intrapersonal dynamics, interpersonal and intrapersonal like dynamics, what is the experience of that? And it feels to me to be in good scholarship, to bring in folks who have done tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, now training, working in this space, to be able to offer at least a participatory angle. Because I have a tendency, especially when I'm with you, John, to go very far into the abstract, and I want to make sure that I don't lose that ground. And I think that's a better balance. Yeah. So we last left off with kind of poking meta maps, which is our sort of chief offering around tier 1. And John, you and I talked about Vellman's notion of balancing the embodied cognition with the metacognition. And I think what that space that opens up is what the meta maps try to offer and fill. So I often joke that what modernity gave us is 2 rocks at the edge of a forest, and modernity says, okay, only one of these rocks belongs in this forest. I'm going to cut off one of your legs so you hop through it, and at the end of the forest, you find out which one belongs where. Which one is the real rock that belongs inside that forest?
What are the 2 rocks?
Naturalism and supernaturalism, right? So it offers us that dichotomy. And so we're kind of walking around like doing this and we don't know what to do. So what the meta maps does is they offer a kind of structure for your metacognition to be able to at least have touch points to map your experience, so that instead of walking around in this, the 2 rocks hopping, you have a map. And you can go through it. And when you have a map walking through a forest, you're doing this. Okay, where am I? What's that? Where am I? What's that? Where am I? What's that? And then you walk through the forest that way. And then you might have to change it and draw it up. So that metaphor is to say that we need, I suppose, what you and Greg have called a coherent epistemological ontological framework. We do that in the form of borrowing some of Greg's work and tracking, okay, thoughts, feelings, sensations, justification structures, stories we tell ourselves, right? So how to map our conscious subjective experience. Then we also look at perspectives. So how we map perspectives that we might inhabit or receive from others, right? And we do that across a transparency opacity trade-off and an identification difference trade-off.
Right.
So this is also borrowed a little bit from Ken Wilber's work. The I perspective is transparent and identified. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? Whereas the it would be opaque but identified.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the last one is perhaps the most novel, at least in our space, which is what we call postures of presence. And so what they are what we call like 3 axes that collapse into participation. So one of those axes is inside and outside. We call that the axis of awareness.
Okay.
Right. So in the axis of awareness case, like, well, what's actually outside of me, what's actually inside, and that's a dichotomy. We tend to feel like that's a dichotomy, but when you try and do it, when you enact it, those lines blur.
Yeah.
But it's good to be able to, I think, try and address an issue which you've pointed out to me for months now, which is that people are, we're still in the substance ontology, we're still in that language. And so when we're practicing, we can't just go, here it is, just do that. But how do we bridge them from a place where it's like, oh, we're confused and torn in these dichotomies, but offer ways in which they can bridge up and go, okay, there are new affordances now. So that's what I want to name just as an initial proposal. And then we can talk a little bit more roughly in tier 2 around dynamics, how that might have impacted our relationships, the ways in which we've related differently, what shadow work is, all of that is on the table. But that's my initial proposal. So let's take it over to there. Anything catch your attention, John?
Just a sort of a question and a request for more information. You said there were 3 dimensions of participation. You did one dichotomy, inside and out. What are some of the others?
So we call it inside, outside, moving, being moved, so active, passive.
Right.
And holding space, giving space.
Good. That's very helpful. Those are very good practices. So before we move into tier 2 and we take up, and I want it mostly to be between the 3 of you, and I might interject with a question or a what's happening right now kind of thing. What do people come away like from tier 1 with? And maybe this would also be a good time to hear it from Rens and from Ellie. Where were they at such that they wanted to go into tier 2? And I'm aware there's confounds. You were also forming a relationship with Ethan. You were meeting other people. There's all kinds of other reasons why we do the things we do. And so I'm going to acknowledge them right now and give credit to them. But above and beyond that, what was there that you can attribute to tier 1 itself that oriented you and motivated you to going into tier 2? Maybe we'll start with, Rens, you first.
Of course. I did tier 1 and tier 2 at the same time, so I was kind of trapped into doing both.
Why didn't you leave?
Okay. Why didn't I leave? So maybe this is a bit conflated, but while you're talking about the meta maps, what I feel like they did for me when I first got them is that it gave my efforts of introspection a way of breaking through the stuck patterns that they always that my thoughts always went through. So it's thinking about it poetically, it's like a different road that my thoughts could go down when I'm introspecting or when I'm thinking about how to participate in a certain context. It's like, this is how I always do it. And this is always the story I tell myself about how I showed up, how I might be able to show up better. But then experiencing this context of tier 1, where we were doing a lot of things, interacting with a lot of people in this different way, that opened up all these different new pathways of how I could show up, how I could relate to myself and to others. Those meta maps were like something I could take home with me, into the world with me, and open up that path again.
Can you give an example, bro? And there's there's a frame,
yes,
right? But I'm desiring the picture.
Yeah. Something like, moving, being moved. I find a helpful one, where I think being moved is very habitual for me. So it's very easy for me to show up in a situation and mold myself to what I think the other person wants from me. And then when that's unconscious, I have very little agency over it. But with going through TIAMAT and this meta map this is a particular instance where I can implement that specific meta map, where I can make opaque what's happening for me of I'm moving, I'm trying to mold myself into what I think this person wants from me right now. I can notice that, and I can implement the meta map and switch into moving. Like, okay, let me.
Oh, you were being moved when you're being molded.
Exactly.
Okay, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So let me switch from the thing that I'm doing now, which is being moved, into moving, so that I can show up in a different way with this person.
So it's what do I want to say? It's a procedural, perspectival, participatory active open-mindedness. So Barron, he only talks about it in terms of overcoming biases in our inferential processes. But you're talking about becoming aware of certain biases, habitual framings that can mislead you or misdirect you. And instead of them being transparent, you can step back and become aware of them. You can intervene in them, and you can actively compensate to make them more virtuous in how they're showing up in the world, how you're showing up in the world. Did I get that right?
Yes.
I think that's powerful because I hadn't thought about it this way before. But what's partially happening here is taking Barron's notion of active open-mindedness and expanding it into the non-propositional kinds of knowing. That's something I have to think about more, but that's very, very powerful. There's lots of evidence that active open-mindedness is one of the strongest, as a cognitive style, is one of the best predictors of how rational, in the sense of reasonable, not logical, but of how reasonable you show up in situations, how reasonable you are in your thinking. And so you're extending that in a powerful way. That was very helpful. Thank you, Rens.
Yeah, and one of the ways in which we teach that, at least in the process of teaching each of the axes, is to say, hey, notice what feels comfortable to you. Like, are you very comfortable with being moved from inside, giving space? Okay, what if you then try the complete opposite? Or what if you just switched one of them? And so when we do the tier 1, there's an ongoing investigation of like, okay, well, maybe you can take a particular combination of the meta maps as almost like a mantra, like an experimental mantra. And so when we do say like the focusing, right, we do the focusing part of Vipassana, right, on every breath, can you say, okay, I know that I'm used to being moved from inside, giving space. So I'm now going to try moving from outside, holding space. And so when we're in the sit, is to refresh that and just recite it almost. So it's okay. Like a silent chanting, right? So it's moving from outside, holding space. Moving from outside, holding space. Right? So that when we open up into the playground and it's improvisational, it changes something about the orientation as a whole, and then new discoveries might open up, new affordances might open up.
Well, I want to hear what Ellie has to say, and then I'm going to ask a question of both.
For context, I think I did my first tier 1 like 3 or 4 months after we started dating. And so in those 3 or 4 months, I had to do this thing of like, oh, this is about TIAMAT, I shouldn't listen, so that I go in with like a fresh whatever. And then when I did it for the first time, it was with some of your Taiwan collaborators.
Yes.
Who were kind of familiar with the work, but there were some updates. And so we did it in Mandarin and Chinese. And I was the only, I guess, like person who was completely new to TIAMAT. And what was most memorable for me was that it's actually just the first agreement of honor yourself. Because there's a way in which, like, I'm a dancer, I'm very familiar with going for different kind of movement workshops or even kind of dialogical workshops where I'm like open and curious to learning what's out there. And then I go and then I do the exercises and I gauge my competence, or like, both my competence and what I need to learn. It's kind of quite a mechanical attitude that I take to myself and the thing that I'm learning. And then it's like, yeah, I could want to do this. I could want to do this. But if I really took the question of like even just these postures of presence, which one exactly do I want to do right now? The answer at that time was always nothing, none. I don't actually want to do any of this. And that was, I think, the first time I took that not wanting seriously and felt a really deep sense of like, oh my God, I don't actually want to do anything. What's wrong with me? Or like, why? And there, like, I felt some it was complicated, but I felt like I closed off a lot of possibilities. Like if I really listen to myself, I don't actually want to participate, and that like I felt really sad about that. And then that's why I wanted to do tier 2 to figure out what was happening, what was underlying all of that. Yeah.
So that's helpful, Ellie. So both of you, there's two things, and I'll ask both questions, and you can answer them as you feel. One is there's some sort of compensatory thing happening. You're realizing, right? I was locked in some fashion, and then there's an unlocking that happens. What was transparent becomes opaque. You're aware of a framing, and you're trying to break free from it. So two questions come to mind. One, I think we need to ask for on behalf of people who are watching, which is, okay, but why isn't this just therapy? And what makes it different from therapy? And then secondly, and this is maybe a little bit clearer of a question for Rens, but Ellie, I hope it can land for you as well. The problem with compensatory moves, especially if we've been very locked, is a tendency to overcompensate. And what we need is some phenomenological touchstone that tells us when we're getting it right, when it's ringing true, when we're finding Aristotle's golden mean. And so one way of putting this is when you're locked, there's a deficit of flexibility, but there can also be a vice of excessive flexibility, right? And so those two. The second question is, what is guiding you such that you can properly attune and you don't go the compensation doesn't become overcompensation. And that's a very important thing in our culture right now, because this is what we keep doing in our culture. We keep unlocking and then overcompensating, and then we swing back and forth in a wildly destructive fashion. Dukkha, the wheel off center on its axle, spinning out of control. And then I want you to answer these two questions together, because one thing you could think about is how therapy because in therapy we're doing this, and then this is the guiding normativity, and we have all this blah, 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 and that's what constrains the overcompensation. But if this isn't therapy, I think it's fair for me to ask, what, if it's not a therapeutic normativity that is guiding you, what is the normativity that's guiding you to prevent you from falling into overcompensation? Now, I know that's a complicated question, but I'm trying to get it. I'm trying to take two things and come to where they converge, this point. So that's my question.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to me is that they converge in participation and continuing to participate. That as I went through TIAMAT, I swung to the opposite sides in all sorts of ways. Whereas before I saw myself as mostly valueless and the world is a dangerous place, then overcompensation. I am great. I can do this. Ethan, I can teach a tier 1. let's yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, not that far. And I think it's by continuing to participate, by continuing to have my relationships with the two of you, with the other aspirants, with the people in my life, I can, and in continuing to go through the course, I can hone in on a kind of center.
That's valuable.
Yeah, that's the best I can do for now.
Well, that's very. That's very much Yanaris's communal criterion of truth. Truth is that which affords shared sense presence. That's really interesting. You're actually giving me a concrete example of exactly that. That's how we get a sense. We do that circumambulation of perspectives and identities. Okay, that's very helpful, and it's helpful outside of, like I said, really helped me getting a clear idea of what Yonaris is talking about how if truth is not affording shareable and mutually correctable sensed presence of meaning, we shouldn't be talking about it as truth. And then you just enacted it there, which was really, really sweet and delicious. How is that not therapy? Because I have a sense how it's not, but I want you to articulate. How is that not just therapeutic?
I feel somewhat constrained by the fact that I've never been in therapy, but how I imagine it not being the same as therapy is that the authority is a lot more flat and participatory, rather than therapy being a place where you go and talk to somewhat of an authority figure that's separate from your life.
I see.
And then you go back into your life. And then there's still this, like, I imagine there would still be this like centering process and swinging. But here it feels a lot more distributed, and like, and those two domains that are separate in therapy have much more overlap.
Can I stretch a little bit more also?
Yes.
Because I think what's coming out for me, and I'm not trying to expose you, but I want
Please.
to also name sort of like where I've heard the most impact around, like, at least what's impacted me very strongly is because we talk quite often. That when I hear you say, oh, I go back to my family, I'm visiting my family for the weekend, or I had a chat with this friend, and these are people who have not come to workshops or are not within, I suppose, even the aspirant cohort. What I've noticed about you, which allows me to trust you quite a lot, is that you're also taking their feedback very seriously. This person has named this or has mentioned this, and it's like, I always get the sense from you that you take that feedback seriously and as self-corrective. Like, okay, how does it apply to relationships and dating? How does it apply to what's happening? How am I participating differently in a work setting or in like a different residency and, in like summer jobs, that kind of thing.
And also, how's that feedback that I'm getting out in the world, how could that inform how we might need to do things differently as well?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it feeds back and it corrects what we're doing as well. Yeah.
Could I now ask Ellie to answer those two questions and how they converge?
I feel like this is kind of a tangential answer, but I'm going to try. There's a way in which therapy and my worldview before doing TIAMAT was very substancy and transactional. There was a time where I went into a more of like, everything's so beautiful, and like, we don't need to be anything more, we're just fine, we just need to be, which was more open, but it also kind of hid the instrumental attitude that was still there, or that is very much ingrained. And I think therapy, at least I went to therapy with that very instrumental kind of intention of like, I have an issue, I want to get a solution to it. The expert has been trained in multiple solutions that, have evidence that might work. So that's why I'm going to them. Whereas in TIAMAT, it's much more of like, it depends on who I'm doing these practices with.
Right.
In every different configuration of participants, friends, I find new ways that I can be with, or new questions to ask myself, even just to reflect on what's underneath why I do anything at all. And in that process, I realized I need to be careful about this. Like the non-dual, or like the fact that multiple things can be happening at once, and it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like something can feel really difficult and also really joyous at the same time.
Right.
So there's like both weight and a lightness. And that was like, there's this analogy I used to use. It felt like my world changed from a 2D world into a 3-dimensional world.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there's this whole new arena to play in.
Mm.
Yeah, which therapy didn't really do for me. It opened up more things, but in a 2D way.
Mm.
Yeah.
Something like that. So I'm hearing that's a really good insight. I'm hearing therapy, and I think it's fair to say that therapy often presents itself this way, especially with its allegiance to sort of the medical institutions. It's an instrumental, engineered approach to a specific sort of breakdown or problem. And what you find in TIAMAT is not that instrumental engineering attitude. It's much more, emergent, dependent on who you're working with. And then what you noted was a complexification, right? Not just more, like therapy might give you, but more dimensions, like that's your 2D to your 3D. And I'm wondering, is that partially also an answer to my question about overcompensation? Because it strikes me that being rigid or overcompensating both destroy the affordance for complexification. But when we're getting it right, we have complexification. And Rens, you were also sort of alluding to that. I'm trying to get at, again, and that would make sense given how much the multiple perspectives and multiple identities and multiple games drive you towards complexification. The idea that, like, when you went from 2D to 3D, you didn't say, well, maybe that's a mistake, right? It struck you as I'm more in touch with reality. I have an enhanced and increased sense reality, and I'm wondering if it's that emergent complexification that is right, and it goes with what you said too, Rens. If that's our sense that we're getting in between rigidity and overcompensation, because both rigidity destroys complexification because it doesn't allow transformation. Overcompensation, right, is because it destroys any emergent structures that are trying to take shape. Right? There's no integration. Is that track? I know I'm using abstract language because right now I'm trying to get a theoretical purchase on the phenomenology. Okay, what is it they're telling me? What is it they're doing? Is this landing at all? I'm trying to pick up on your 2D, 3D thing, Ellie. I think that's really, really important. And for me, that's a prototypical way of talking about complexification. Like, you're not losing the 2 dimensions, right? They're being folded into an emergent, new, more complex structure.
Yeah. I mean, what came up for me when you mentioned rigidity and overcompensation was that both seem like states of certainty. Like, it must be this, or it must be this other thing. And in between is all this ambiguity. And I think that's where we play.
Right. But I want to press on that because ambiguity can be really horrible too, right? So there's an implicit normativity here of the good ambiguity versus the bad ambiguity. So I can give my question back to you again then. What allows you to distinguish the good ambiguity from the bad ambiguity? And I think it's something like an intimation that this is going to give birth to complexity, where the other one is just dissipating my attention and my efforts and frustrating me.
Mm-hmm. it's like, yeah, you're right, because I'm really familiar with the bad kind of ambiguity
Yes,
in the art.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I do for me, and I feel like I'm at a really early stage of this, or it's still quite very new to me. It is a kind of felt sense or phenomenology of like all of being able to see all these things that were always possible, but that I'm only getting to know now. All these ways of being, or all these ways of acting even, that I could possibly do, that in the past just seemed like it never occurred to me that in that moment.
So sorry, I keep on following this because I feel like I'm on something here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my hand is complex because it can do many different things while still holding together. I think the bad ambiguity is many possibilities open up, but there's no way in which they're held together. And I think what you're telling me is you had those possibilities, but they open up, and then you're in a space that holds them all together and gives you access in a coordinated fashion to the possibilities. That's what I mean by complexification. That like the possibilities were out here and they were just abstract, and now they're live for me because I'm in a place from which I can reach them all. Is that tracking?
Yes, and that reaching feels like completely agentic and practical.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Yeah.
Not airy-fairy, not like view from nowhere, kind of like, they exist in some kind of abstract space. Yeah, but I'm struggling to make it more concrete than what I'm saying.
No, you're doing a great job. I think
I'm tracking it.
Yeah, I think this discussion about trying to discern good, okay, I think that idea about ambiguity, neither certainty, right? But then how do I discern the good ambiguity from the bad ambiguity? And this notion of the sensed presence of possibility as a live option rather than as an abstract goal that is somehow unreachable by you. That I think is very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, does that relate to the therapy question that you asked earlier? And if so, how? Because the way that I'm holding it somewhat abstractly is that if I'm receiving therapy, then the normativity of the therapy, if it's instrumental, if it come with an instrumental orientation, is does it solve my problem?
Yes.
Which presupposes that I knew what that problem was anyway. But what I'm hearing you articulate is something different, which to me is, and I'm particularly biased because I think this is what therapy should be doing, which is empowering someone's agency. What I'm hearing you say, Papao, is that the ambiguity arises, but the certainty of what I thought was the problem now fades into the background, but I can participate in the ambiguity and I can participate in the problem formulation process. And in doing that, the affordances open up. Rather than, oh no, now it's complex, now I need someone to tell me what to do here, someone to tell me what to do here, someone to tell me what to do here and fix that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm not trying to, I would not try to propose a dichotomy between therapy and what you're doing. I think that's, there's a continuum. So we're talking about the poles, not the polarity. But
neither are we discouraging people from therapy, by the way.
No.
This is not what I'm doing. We're talking about the phenomenology behind.
But I'm also trying to say, what could you reasonably expect to reliably get from TIAMAT that you might not get easily accessed in therapy? That's what I'm trying to get at, because our culture has been conditioned into the garbage can of therapy, which is, well, you don't have a problem that fits into all the other institutionalized problem-solving machines, go get therapy. That's what we do now. And for me, there's this whole dimension of you're not instrumentally solving a problem, right? You're doing something else. You're opening up possibilities of how to live, which is a different thing. So to use some of the psychological language, most therapy is about addressing pathology. TIAMAT is about, right, cultivating excellence. It's right. And in that sense, it's more like positive psychology.
Mm-hmm. And I think I want to add something to what you've named also, which might bring sort of what both of you have brought together, which is that there's this deep participation in being able to play in the possibility space.
Yeah.
But then there's also a corrective function that is distributed rather than authoritative.
I think that's really important. Okay, I think we've really done great at tier 1 and then the liminal between tier 1 and tier 2. And now I'm going to pass it back to you, Ethan, to open the door into tier 2 and talk about a little of the stuff, some of the stuff we talked about off camera and what you foreshadowed at the beginning of this recording.
Yeah, thanks. So about a year and a half ago, Taylor Barratt sort of passed me this paper that was written by Ken Wilber and Dustin DiPerna called Towards a Deliberately Developmental Civilization. And Taylor and I use this metaphor in common in all of our containers, which is they propose that in order to become deliberately developmental, you have to address 3 important poles, or what Taylor calls the 3-legged stool. If you lose one of these legs, the stool falls over. And that's structures of consciousness, states of consciousness, and shadow work. So obviously across tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, structures, dynamics, and states, you can hear the echo of that. The shadow work piece for me has now recently been rejigged into speaking about dynamics. And I'm trying to address kind of what, John, you had pointed at, which is around, I suppose, a kind of hunger for a psychological structure, I suppose, or structure of psychotherapy, which comes up in our pop culture, right? So there's a lot of this like pop psychology, especially now with the advent of social media. On TikTok or Instagram, you can look up the things that you need to do, how to change your mind about this thing, how to influence your relationships or your mental health in this way, that way, other. And for me, I think I've noticed an issue around shadow work. So, and Jung's corpus at large, which is that there is a kind of cherry picking of things that Jung has said that are, these are good, and shadow is one of those things, where I think there's a conflation. There's a conflation and a rhetoric behind it, which is that, if you do shadow work, you heal all your trauma and you'll magically become better. But you need to go deep down into the storehouse of your pain, pop that open, gaze into the abyss, unpack all of that, and suddenly your life will turn over and become better. And here are a list of 15 things that you can do if you buy my book to fix that in 30 days. Yeah. Which to me is like, okay, first of all, Jung's work is broad and he has a coherent, at least to him, system of the ways in which those work. So when we cherry pick something like that out, I think there is a risk of over-indexing on that. So with shadow work, I think that what people now conflate as or call shadow work is actually a conflation between shadow work and animal work. Animal work being the more sort of like developmental trauma piece. And shadow work actually being more of a trait-based character intervention piece, right? So the issue that I'm seeing is that when this conflation is alive and active, people identify with their states as being their shadow. So if I want to be happy, then all the times that I feel sad, that's my shadow. So my shadow is all of the things that make me feel sad. But,
really? People are doing that? I believe you, by the way, but that's really a mistake.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge mistake. And, to me, I find that like, okay, we need to parse those out a little bit. Which is why I offer.
But it's a mistake because the shadow is archetypal, and that's not how you're supposed to understand archetypes. You're not supposed to identify them with one particular form of manifestation. You have to look for deep dispositional patterns, not just experiential intensity or contrast.
Yes, exactly. And this is why when I do my intro to shadow work, I have to give like a framing lecture of exactly this thing, which is, the ways in which we enact ourselves in the world, right? The affordances that we have socially, relationally, and particularly the ones that are disidentified.
That's the key idea, Ethan. The shadow
Yes.
is about patterns of deep identification. It's not about contrasting sets of affective states.
Yes, exactly. And I'm exasperated at how often I have to explain this to people. Because I think when we understand them as the traits that we disidentify, automatize. Sorry, so they are automatic, and dissociated, right? So it's not only is it just in plain language not me, but I don't even remember when I behave in that way to other people. But Jung pointed this out in Ion. We recognize that as a maladaptation, right? So he calls it a character maladaptation. When something occurs, like I say something to you, I go like, dude, don't be such a fucking asshole, man, right?
Fuck, that hurts.
And I go like, I recognize this maladaptation, right? Actually, we notice it on some level, but when we recognize them as traits as opposed to intense states of affect, now something opens up, an affordance opens up where we can go, okay, what kind of person would I like to be and how do I address that? And I think that's distinctly different from at least my conception or my proposal of the anima, which is the ground upon which those affordances are generated at all, right? The framing of that. So we can talk about that more at length because that's more complex. But when we're talking about dynamics, particularly in tier 2, we're trying to do exercises that get us used to understanding how we project. So what projection is, and that's to be clear between projection in the predictive processing sense, right? And psychodynamic projection. That's a distinction that we draw as well. The distinction between traits and states. So one doesn't necessarily feel aggressive. What is beneath the aggression, right? And we might see the affective state then as anger, but the aggression is a trait. And I can recognize where I am and how I experience something as intense as anger or fear, but I can regain my agency in the ways in which I can enact that in the world, right? In a different way. I don't have to be aggressive just because I'm angry, right? So this is the thing that we're trying to explore in tier 2, to be able to say that, hey, how do you come into a relationship with yourself that allows you to recognize what's coming up for you, how you might be motivated in the world, how that habitually, in an automatic fashion, enacts itself in your relationships with others, right? And allow ourselves a little bit more flexibility for that. Of course, within distributed group practices that I can go, wow, if I say this is the kind of feedback that I get. Okay, then I have to tune, and I have to tune, and I have to tune. And a lot of it is non-propositional. I think tier 2 is probably the most quote unquote intense, intense, most embodied, and deeply relational part of the container. Yeah. So that's what I will offer kind of front and center, and then we can have at it. Yeah.
That's great. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to talk about how that is showing up for all of you, or at least Rens and Ellie in tier 2? I
think that's good. So
yeah, let's do that then.
Yeah. I would love to actually hear from the two of you. I know we've had longer discussions about some of these and they're ongoing, but perhaps in a more reflective capacity, now that you guys maybe have had some time away from a tier 2, what are some dynamics that, as you're looking back, where, I discovered this in tier 2 and this is the journey that I went through, whether in the container and also out, integrating that recognition with your everyday life. Like, what are some of the dynamics that you have noticed in your relationships that might have shifted or changed, or you still hold a question around?
Something that I remember quite clearly happening. So in tier 2, I want to push back a little bit about what you said about tier 2 being the most like in a sense like intense or embodied, because tier 3 it's like tier 2 plus plus plus. So but in tier 2, whereas in tier 1 I was more of seeing being able to see how I interacted with this group and what comes up for me. In tier 2, I'm seeing how I have always or have been interacting with the world that results in the deep-seated patterns that you were mentioning, John. And that's really difficult to look at sometimes, because there's a lot of shame, at least for me, around them. Like a concrete example was I was having this really big shift, and this also comes from our conversations, just my conversations with Ethan, about how I saw gender roles in the world. And in a personal context, like within my family now, there's me, my sister, my brother, and my dad. And there's always this dichotomy between, there's always this like tension between the women and the men of the house. And my sister and I used to have a lot of stories about how the men in the house would not hold on to the mental load, would not be aware of what needs to be done, would not communicate, and all these. And but yet we had not had a direct, like, open conversation with not the men in the house, but my father and my brother, who I love deeply. And I didn't even recognize that. Like, it didn't occur to me that, hello, this hasn't happened yet, because the kind of information that I was getting on social media, my friends were also like, yeah, there's a way in which I felt we were not being very rigorous or generous to the opposite gender, to men. And like in tier 2, when we do things like 2-person Vipassana, I'm hearing myself say all the things that I would not ever say in real life, but I have thought, and I do think those things at some times. And that's the confrontation with myself, that I realized, like, okay, something needs to happen here. I can't not see this anymore. And then something like it shifts. Yeah, it feels like a big shift, and then I can go and have a conversation with my dad, my brother, my sister about this, and now my thinking or my attitude around, like, men or what it means to talk about gender roles at all is quite different. Yeah.
Is that, I'm just trying to understand what the dynamic is that you're pointing at, which seems to be something like the assignment or I suppose the lens of the gender role thing is transparent and automatically imposed upon the world, including most presciently in your family, right? But then in tier 2 and through conversations with me, what actually ends up happening is being able to go, hey, what this thing keeps happening, and if I don't look at it that way, or if I just turn the lens or clean it or get more like higher resolution on why that's there, in what way, in what form, and the impact that it has, through sort of verbalizing it, I suppose, in the example that you're giving, that you now have more what's the word, facility with it. With
the dynamic, or with what?
With the way in which it's because it's more opaque to you, there's more facility with it rather than it coming up forward and it becomes the frame in which you look at the world.
Yeah.
Right.
So now I can feel more intentional and agentic about, like, is this the kind of dynamic you want to have with your dad? You know, and what can you, if not, what do I do about it? Yeah.
Is there something like that for you? Or,
Yeah. No. You just did what I wanted to do, Ethan. That was very good. I wanted to thank Ellie and just ask Rens the same thing.
Yeah. The major one for me, when I did the tier 1 and tier 2 in Czech Republic 2 years ago now.
Last year.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Was the realizing how terrified I was of the world and other people, and how much that fear of social judgment was actually driving me.
Right.
And then tier 2 is this. It was like a context where I could open that up pretty much fully and be terrified and like in a fully embodied way, like, I'm really scared of you guys right now. I'm afraid you're judging me. You're thinking this about me. You're hating everything I'm saying. And then the feedback that I could get from all these people was, no, we're not judging you. Some people might have been indifferent. Some people might have been sympathetic. But it was not the pattern my mind was predicting. The feedback I got did not fit the model.
Mm-hmm.
And then through that, it's been a long and bumpy process, but I've definitely gotten a degree of peace from that consuming fear.
Good. It was 5 days of that.
Yeah.
I sat with you in your fear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the peace that I've gotten has been more long-term.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I think there's something, I love that. There's something valuable about that, what you named, and this might also feed well into sort of the ongoing project of the integration between predictive processing and relevance realization, which is, there is a story that I have about the world. There's a model that I hold. I project it onto the world, and I recognize that for whatever reason, people are going to think this or be this, or they'll behave in a particular way. And we've mapped that as the affordance landscape of how we've been treated before, how we treat others. And there's, a limited scope on that, depending on how much experience you've had and the kinds of developmental experiences you've had. And I imagine it's quite, we were talking about this especially in the context of dating as well. And we ran into this especially when we were dating as well. Like, when we think this is the way that the world works, and then someone comes in good faith and goes, yeah, I know. It's like, oh, really? That's possible. I remember when we were having one of our first contractions, you had named to me that, like, I don't know, it was in it or after, where you were like, I had no idea someone could be upset and angry, but also logical and gentle and wanting to hear what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, and that seemed to be quite a shift for you.
Yeah, that was. It felt like a superpower. Like, whoa! What kind of training have you had? And that was early days, right?
But but the opposite is also true, which is like, for me, it was somewhat far away from me that there was a possibility that someone could be in a contraction with me or be in a conflict with me, right? And not collapse, but to actually like hold and go, no, tell me what's happening. Why is this? And to treat me with a gentleness and the grace to go, like, when I'm angry, you treat me with grace. And I go, I don't know what to do with this? Oh, I guess I have to figure out, right? And then that's how it sort of opens up the affordance landscape.
So what I hear you saying, and you invoked predictive processing relevance realization, is you're actually opening up, you're diversifying the potential error sources on your predictive processing, and then you have to re-engage relevance realization to do how to pay attention to those error signals and get the correct precision weighting on the new kinds of error signals, which goes back to the right normativity, getting the sweet spot between. So that's landing very, very well for me. What about you, Ethan? I've been hearing a lot from Rens and Ellie, which has been really good, by the way. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the things is, given what we've said, is you're not standing outside of this wielding therapeutic instrumentality. You're participating, but you're also facilitating. What has that been like for you? That must be it developing its own set of skills and states and traits in order to get that sweet spot between too much therapeutic intervention and too much theoretical reflection, or I don't know what to say, but you know what I'm trying to point to.
I know what you mean, and this is something that has come up like quite a lot, and we've made it as an organization at 5 to Midnight. Like one of the guiding ideas is exemplification over demonstration. So when I'm explaining an exercise, or when we're doing 2-person vipassana, we're doing owning your judgments, or we're in the gymnasium, right? When I'm explaining the exercise, even with one of the co-facilitators, that I'm not trying to make a facsimile of what it would look like. What I'm trying to do is to work with something that's actually here for me, actually present. And I think the tier 2 that we did last year, I was wrestling deeply with this sense of, am I good enough to actually facilitate this? Mm-hmm. Because that was in the midst of the conversations that you and I and Taylor were having, John.
Yep.
Where it's like, oh shit, there's actually quite a lot here. And Taylor, for the love of him, he's one of my best friends, and therefore I can trust him to tell me straight. And one of the things that he told me straight was like, dude, I love you, but you don't have the degree of experience to be able to hold this alone. You need to have a team with you, right? And I went from that into a container where I'm like, okay, well, I'm running this by myself, kind of, but is it really that? Is it really that? Or am I truly alone if I'm only alone if I'm not participating? But I reasoned it for myself that, okay, if I participate and I take everyone's feedback seriously, then in a way we're helping each other. So I was wrestling with this thing of not being good enough. And in one of our exercises called the market, which is basically a deeply embodied ritual of recognizing your wants, right, and your desires, kind of like I suppose a primary fundamental drive thing. You're allowed to make requests to other people, and they have to find it in themselves what we call either a fuck yes or a no. It's either fuck yes or no. There's no in between. There's no renegotiation. So what ended up happening is I go, okay, what do I actually need right now? And what surfaced for me was I want to be trusted. I want to be trusted by people who trust me. And so there was something of like, I asked the cohort, would you all be willing to have me ask you if I'm enough to run a container like this and tell me no? And to reject my question or refuse my question. And the feedback from everybody was, we're not going to do that. There's no need to tell you that you're enough in that way. So there wasn't a sense there that they needed to give me affirmation, right? But that refusal, you see how multi-layered this is, right? Like that refusal means I go, oh, I'm confronted with the fact that like people actually do trust me. And then now I have to walk away and deal with that. But in the dealing with that, what it did for me was that it called me to a higher normativity, which is, okay, so people actually do trust me. My stories about them thinking I'm an imposter are all wrong, right? Like I hold my imposter syndrome with a degree of proportion, rational proportion, right? But then it could call me and it opened up more affordances of, okay, then I'm going to show up into conversations with John differently. I need to ask different questions. I will be a little bit more rigorous. I can be more vulnerable, more humble with this. And it popped that open for me. Mm-hmm. So when I'm facilitating, I always take it that I don't have everything figured out, that I try and recognize where this work is something that I can exemplify and embody, and trust that it will be of as much service to me as it is to everyone else. And in doing that, sort of actualize it. So I went around your question, but I think this is
no. You didn't go around it at all. Maybe other than circumambulate it in a Platonic fashion, which I like. That was very helpful. I think people are getting a very good sense, and the fact that you're doing exactly what you just said. The three of you, you're exemplifying rather than merely demonstrating in a prescriptive propositional fashion. You're demonstrating by exemplifying. I think I think this has been very successful. I guess I'd like to start bringing this one to a close. We're at our time, and what I want to do is I want to shut up. And first of all, before I do, I'll thank all three of you. You all held your roles with a lot of good ratio religio, and it was very, very helpful. And I thought there was good interaction between the three of you, and also good interaction between the three of you and me that I think was helpful. But now I want to be quiet and allow the three of you to bring this to a close in the way that you mutually see best fit.
I'm holding a question, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate for closing, but I'll try and we'll discuss maybe. I had a follow-up question to what you were sharing about how the facilitating the container has impacted you and how you've changed because of that. I'm still curious about how that within the container that has transferred into your life. How the change that has happened, say, within the context of the container has transferred into your life. Yeah. Is that a new thing?
That I think serves as a wonderful bridge into a third conversation. Because what this work has done is illuminated for me on its own terms in my own practice, which I imagine is different for John's path. Like it's kind of shown me a road up, how to say, it's like a path on the Silk Road that John is not tugging for me, but is nonetheless in parallel. And that's the only thing that I can articulate, is that it's a deep calling to continue. It's a pilgrimage on its own. Yeah. So I think that's a good bridge. Yeah, that's what I would say to that. What do you have, brother?
It's an honor to walk this path with you guys. Yeah, that's what I'm with, and with gratitude for you having us on. That's what's here for me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ellie.
Well, I've been starting to describe TIAMAT to other people as we are trying to teach, for lack of a better word, or enable people to be able to enact a relational ontology. And that has felt one of the most kind of radical changes in me and to me, that has affected or impacted every aspect of my life and how I treat people and how I treat the world. So, yeah. There's a lot. Like knowing that we are going into another big conversation soon. I feel at home, like more at home in the world, in a sense of like, I don't need to like put on my armor and like prepare this and prepare that and then go in. It's more like, this is my home. That's also my home. I'm just gonna go in and be like, oh, what's gonna happen here with us today? And I feel really grateful that I can do that at all. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.